former state judge, #1 show now on Fox Business, going to daily, weekdays. It's so successful. Just out of nowhere, he comes on, boom, #1. I'll guarantee you they put him on main Fox. He would beat everybody on that network, even if they put him at 10 o'clock at night. And that's what I told him, 6, 8 months ago when I knew he was getting his weekend show. I said, you watch, it's going to have, massive ratings. And you were like, I just hope to, do okay. And you remember on air and off air, Judge, I told you.
You did, Alex, and you were right, and I have been surprised and delighted at the generosity of viewers. We've been doing very, very well, and management decided to take us daily, and we expect that will happen before Thanksgiving.
Daily on Fox Business.
On Fox Business. We will continue the show on weekends. Basically, we will take one of the 5 dailies and run it as the weekend show, but our prime work will be prime time. I don't know the time. It'll be prime time on the Fox Business Network with the full support of the Business Network and many, many cross-promotions on the Fox News Channel and my continued appearances on the Fox News Channel and my continued fill-ins for Glenn-Beck, which I'm doing as soon as next Tuesday.
Are you influencing Glenn because he is getting more and more hardcore? Last night, we played a clip earlier in the show. He talked about the Fabian socialists wanting to poison the water supply. And
I don't want to take credit for influencing him. I will tell you this. We spend a lot of time together. We do a lot of speaking gigs together. When you travel with Glenn, you travel first class, so we're in a small private jet, and we do a lot of talking. He has told me that I have changed his mind on 2 issues. One is the Patriot Act, and the other is the morality, lawfulness, and constitutionality, or lack thereof, of torture. So I will only take credit for those 2 areas, which are profound. I did not hear what he said about the Fabian socialists, and I didn't hear what he said about poisoning the water supply until you told me, because I was on another show last night when he said that. But I'm not surprised that he said it. I'm happy that he's issuing those warnings. And, Alex, those warnings are resonating with people. You've been saying this for years. Now he's saying it. Between the 2 of you, that is a monstrous audience hearing these things.
Well, every day for 2 years, I have shown the quotes from Eco-Science where Holdren said reduce population, a planetary tyranny to do it, forced sterilization through the water. Beck quoted Eco-Science word for word last night. He played George Bernard Shaw. I mean, literally, it's and I've been critical of Beck on torture and the police state and things he supported. But, I mean, I know it shows one thing. The mood of the country has changed. If Judge Andrew-Napolitano has the #1 show on Fox Business and is getting a primetime show weekdays, and Glenn Beck is now able to go on the air and talk about things that 15 years ago I was called a lunatic for, when all I was doing was reading their own statements.
Well, you have to add to that and I'm not just blowing smoke at you, you have to add to that the phenomenal success of your own show. People have awakened. When people ask me about the Tea Parties, I take them back to my youth. This is before you were born, when Barry Goldwater ran against LBJ. That is the last time I can, and I was 13 years old, that's the last time I can remember as serious and as profound a debate about the Constitution and the role of the federal government in the lives of individuals in the past 50 years.
And Goldwater came out and quoted the Trilateral Commission's plan to set up world government, how the banks would bankrupt us. And now, here we are 40-something years later. It was like Barry Goldwater was a prophet.
Exactly. Goldwater was terrific. To me, the Tea Parties are bringing, except on defense, because I think he would have waged offensive wars, which you and I and most of the folks listening to us now would not.
I agree.
And it's like saying, aside from what happened in the theater, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you like the evening? Because it's a big except. But generally, on the role of the government in the lives of people, generally unlimited government, generally on sound money, he was terrific. And I'll tell you this, Alex, when I talk about the virtues of the Tea Party movement, and it could be co-opted. These guys could get elected and they could become the victims of Potomac fever. I don't think it's going to happen. I say it is a return to our Goldwater roots, not our Reagan roots. I loved Reagan as a human being. I loved his sunny, cheerful personality. I love his up from the bootstraps story, personal story, and I loved his speeches. But he was not a libertarian.
That's right. His rhetoric was good.
Close.
I mean, his rhetoric was good, but what we got was something entirely different, though. It'd be a lot.
Maybe it's easier to be a libertarian when you're in the legislative branch and you don't have to administer a government. I will grant you that. But Goldwater was far purer, far closer to the views of Jefferson, Mises, Hayek, and Alex Jones than Ronald Reagan was.
Okay, Judge, we've only got you here for about another 20 minutes before the show ends. I want to race through a bunch of issues and then find out what is most important on your radar.
Go right ahead.
But I would imagine, being so well-read, you know the Supreme Court justices and the L.A. Times covered this. Here's the headline: First Amendment ruling destined to kill internet free speech. They said that in the case of the funeral protesters, who I disagree with, but it's their right, that they are going to restrict rallies, protest, things that hurt people's feelings. England has just passed similar laws. The Cybersecurity Act did this. They couldn't pass the cyberbullying last year, and so they're now legislating from the bench. They have signaled and said that they are going to rule against rallies and demonstrations that are hurtful. And one justice said this will also affect internet speech. That then dovetails with Microsoft proposes government licensing internet access. I mean, this. Can you speak about the state of free speech in this country? Here's another one. Obama administration pressures ISPs to censor websites without even an order. The White House just tells them what they want taken down outside of a court, and it happens. I mean, this is becoming Maoist China.
Well, I disagree with the view of those who say the court is going to go against free speech. I was not in the courtroom. I read a portion of the transcript of the oral argument, and I interrogated the Fox reporter who was in the courtroom. That Fox reporter, not a lawyer, but a person who covers the Supreme Court for Fox, is of the view that it's going to go in favor of free speech. And this court, and no court is perfect, and a lot of judges, most of them legislate from the bench, but this Supreme Court, with Stevens on it before Kagan got there, invalidated laws that prohibited the slaughter of animal on tapes, a horrible thing that I oppose, but free speech. Invalidated laws that prohibited corporations and labor unions and advocacy groups from getting involved in free speech. I believe that this case is going to go, as horrific as the message is, in favor of the freedom of the messengers in this case.
Okay, well, let's hope you're right, but we'll find out soon. But the other issue is, what about all these moves with cybersecurity, the Obama kill switch, all these different...
Well, that stuff has to be challenged, and it has to be challenged in a couple ways. One, the way you're doing it, by exposing it, because most people don't know about this unless they hear it from you or Stossel or Beck or me, because there are very few national broadcasters addressing this. And secondly, it needs to be challenged in the political arena. The people who do it need to be voted out of office or exposed and forced to explain themselves, in which case they'll be forced out of office. And then, of course, it needs to be challenged. But the court has been pretty good on First Amendment. I mean, the court has let circuit court opinions stand, which invalidated efforts to cleanse the Internet of pornography. Whatever you think of pornography, these things were written supposedly to protect children. It's always for the children. And circuit courts of appeals, that's the intermediate appellate court, throughout the country have invalidated legislation under Clinton, under Bush, and under Obama. And the Supreme Court has refused to accept the government's appeals to overturn those invalidations. So they haven't been bad on the First Amendment. Now, we run the risk of a social conservative like my college classmate Sam Alito joining the big government liberals. We run that risk of them thinking what they know is best for us to watch and listen to and hear. But if Justice Alito sticks to the guns, so to speak, of those who voted for the First Amendment the last time around, I think the First Amendment will prevail.
Well, even if the court says we don't have a First Amendment, possession is 9/10 of the law, we need to continue to exercise it, just like McCain-Feingold tried to block free speech. People just ignored it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the other thing is, I mean, the judgment against Phelps here was provided under some Maryland law. Now, some states would not have such laws. Some states would say you can stand on the sidewalk and say whatever you want. This creates the bizarre conundrum of the First Amendment meaning different things in different states. So if the Supreme Court says this is okay, we're going to uphold this judgment, it's about $8 million, which the church doesn't have, so it may just be a paper judgment. That may not be the law of the land in all 50 states. My own home state of New Jersey, regrettably one of the most progressive in the Union, nevertheless is superb on free speech. Under the New Jersey Constitution, you can stand on a street corner and say whatever you want to whomever you want at any time you want, as long as you're not, preventing people from walking or preventing traffic.
I understand. Judge, on this legal issues, obviously you could teach us all day, and we appreciate you joining us on that subject. But last question, when should the court then release their ruling? In the next 2-3 months?
They release a bunch of rulings 3 times, right before Christmas, in the middle of the spring, or I say around April, and then in June. I think this one's probably going to come in April. I don't think this is going to come until next year. Not for any political reason, but just because the process of getting something like this done takes time. Okay, I've got a stack of other important issues. Go.
You talked about the Federal Reserve getting more power. It did get more power out of the crisis it created.
Right.
They were able to block a true audit in the Senate. Now it's being reported that $821.1 billion of U.S. Treasury notes are now owned by the private Federal Reserve. They are now the second biggest owner of our debt, next to communist China. The Federal Reserve is moving ahead with quantitative easing. The dollar is plunging. Gold is going up. It's becoming more and more clear that we have a financial, military-style occupation of our country, and the bankers are getting record bonuses. They're openly not telling Congress where the trillions are. This is insane. Give us your take on the Federal Reserve being the second biggest owner of our debt. I mean, talk about national security, a private banking cartel, and then the communist Chinese. I mean, this is incredible.
Well, I actually think it's worse than that, Alex. I was on air with one of my colleagues speculating about what might happen if the Republicans take the House and the Republicans take the Senate. And the colleague said, well, at least they can refuse to fund FINREG, the Financial Regulatory Act, the so-called Dodd-Frank Act. And I said, well, most respectfully, they can't. It's under the domain of the Federal Reserve. It doesn't need any funding. The Federal Reserve can print its own money and fund it itself. So the Federal Reserve is probably the most powerful entity on the planet, more powerful than the rest of the federal government combined. It's certainly the most secretive. This is a one-liner that you've used. The job of the CIA is to keep and to steal secrets. We know more about the CIA and what it has kept and what it has stolen than we do about the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve announced yesterday that it's ready to infuse another $1 trillion of cash into the marketplace. What will that do to the value of the dollar in the wallet of everybody listening, in the bank account of everybody listening, invested in the business of everyone listening who's invested in a business, and invested in the home of everyone listening who owns a home? It will decrease its value. When Jefferson and company were running the government in 1792, the Congress enacted the Coinage Act of 1792, which made it punishable by death for anybody in the government to clip coins, stated differently, to devalue the money. The Federal Reserve is doing exactly that which was death penalty eligible when sound money existed in the country. This is the most serious of problems we face. We need to audit the Federal Reserve. We need to audit Fort Knox. And I mean a real audit. We may open up the door and find a stadium full of gold, but it could be hypothecated, it could be pledged, it could be there, but owned by the Bank of China. We need to we need to know who owns what. We need to know every penny the Federal Reserve has printed, every dime the Federal Reserve has spent, every quarter the Federal Reserve has loaned, every dollar the Federal Reserve is expecting back. Now, are we going to get that? I just put this question to Ron Paul not an hour ago in the taping of my weekend show. He thinks we're going to get these answers, but not tomorrow, and not as a result of this election, and not even during the presidency of this president, but in our lifetimes. He thinks we will reach such a crisis point, which he calls a revolution, where the government will be forced to expose what it's been doing